This live video stream is made possible in part by WLCN's live stream technology sponsor, Me Realty, located at 602 Keokuk Street in Lincoln, and online at merealty.com.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in on this, what do I say, balmy 10-degree day, Jim? Is that where we're at right now for a balmy 10 degrees, double digits? Thank you all for tuning in to Viewpoint this morning on 96.3 FM. And a big kudos. I'm not advertising Me Realty at the moment, but I do want to say a huge kudos to Seth Goodman, our guest today. The kudos is thank you for being our technology sponsor.
Sure. Always happy to help.
I mean, you know, we cannot do and bring and broadcast Lincoln Railer games without your support. Technology is the basis of it, and as Lloyd will attest, you know, it's expensive to do startup
Right.
to bring, you know, what we do, correct?
And especially this year, since we're doing all the girls' games and all the boys' games, we basically have to have duplicate equipment plus some things in backup in case something goes wrong. So, absolutely.
It's a great thing to sponsor, too. They're killing it out there. So
They are, and we were talking earlier this morning on one of the Facebook groups. I believe it's We Are Railer Nation. Is that the group?
That's one of them, yes.
One of them. Someone asked, "Hey, where are you watching from?" And Jim said someone was from China.
yeah, I see people on there all over the place.
You know,
it's incredible.
So it really, really is. So it's the world. So kudos. Thank you for
Our pleasure.
for bringing that to us. We greatly appreciate it. Well, the reason why we wanted you to come in, we have a lot to discuss today.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.
Real estate, blues, anything and
Right.
everything. Callers, if you want to call in and ask Seth some questions, 217-648-5510. I did get a few emailed to me. I guess the big main one, and if you can help out with any insight, that would be wonderful. Lincoln College.
Sure.
I know, we're not poking fun at anybody or anything. There's our disclaimer.
Sure.
People don't want it to see, start to deteriorate
Great.
like LDC.
Sure.
Do you have any insight possibly who may be looking at or what's going on with it? And if you don't, we respect that
Sure.
too.
So the latest that I've heard, and I mean, I don't know the specifics, but I don't believe that there's a buyer for it currently. I mean, they did have one at one time. I think there were some medical issues or something along the lines that caused them to not be able to proceed with the purchase, which is at the time of the president's home coming back on the market, because that was part of the transaction. They were selling it all as a whole. I believe, like I said, that did not work, unfortunately, so they've decided to sell the president's home, which is now under contract to be sold. But, they have sold all the outlying buildings as well, the majority of, but the campus itself is still sitting, vacant pretty much and available. So
I mean, it really is a beautiful campus.
it is, yeah, and was such a vital part of our town, right in the center. So, and I mean, they still have some people on staff, obviously, to continue to wrap things up, but I think there's just very few of them left. So
Wonderful. What are you seeing in interest rates right now in a whole? I didn't check rates the other day. So.
I mean, this, a couple months ago, they were up to 8.25, so they were over 8, which was making people a little bit more nervous because that was increasing their payments pretty drastically. This past week, they've been back in the 5s, around 6. So, I mean, it is more normal. We had the 2-3%. We were pretty spoiled. I think people were thinking that was the common general rate, and that's never really been the general rate, So around 6% right now is where we're at, and that is more normal. So we're seeing, we have a lot of people that are still wanting to buy, but the inventory is still almost non-existent. We just don't really have any homes on the market. So when they're coming on, if they're priced right and they're, in decent condition, they're still moving with multiple offers on them. So
I know Jim did a story earlier in the beginning of the year that, U-Haul released that, the mass exodus of people leaving
Sure.
Illinois. However, we watch you on social
Right.
media,
Sure.
and you're selling them like
I've had a lot of people
hotcakes.
moving back to Illinois.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you just never know. I mean, I think a lot of people do leave Illinois, but then they find themselves coming back within a year, a couple of years later, whether it be because it's family here, or where they've gone has become overcrowded, or where they've gone is just too expensive. So it seems to make sense for them to come back. They've kind of gone, and maybe it wasn't exactly what they envisioned, or like I said, they just want to be closer to family. So, but you always hear, I can't wait to leave Illinois, and then a lot of them leave, and then they come back. So, but when they come back, it's a lot quieter than when they leave.
Right.
They don't broadcast it as much. So, yeah.
They're tiptoeing back
Yeah,
into
exactly.
the state.
Exactly.
Because I do know we did have somebody from the Chicago area, I believe, moved to Mason City
Yeah.
a few months ago.
And I've had a lot of people that just pick Central Illinois because it's quiet and nobody knows them, and maybe they just want to be, start over and have, go somewhere that nobody knows them. I mean, I have that quite a bit, honestly. So I don't know their stories or anything like that, but they like to come to this area. And I mean, just last week I had a couple that was in Florida for 40 years, both born and raised here, and then they moved back. So, but everyone has their reasons. So
Are they rethinking it right now? This cold snap, possibly.
I think maybe a little, but I know they're glad to be back with their family. So
No, that's
yeah,
wonderful.
that's a big thing. So
What are you seeing? Are you seeing younger people coming back, or are you seeing the whole genre of ages that
yeah,
are?
I mean, kind of a mix. I have a lot of retired folks that have come back, just because, again, they maybe went and had a career somewhere else, and now that they've retired, they want to be closer to parents or kids or something like that. But then I have had a lot that have left to go, once they've retired, they've gone where their kids and grandkids are. So it's kind of a mix. But, I mean, people are buying all across the board, age-wise. And so, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say there's really anything in particular I'm seeing. It's just kind of a broad thing. So.
I mean, it was community-wise too. I mean, you've had some properties there in Clinton, Cell,
Right.
and,
Yeah. All over.
Bloomington,
Yeah.
Pekin,
Yeah.
Springfield.
Bloomington, Champaign, Springfield, you name it. So.
No, that's wonderful.
Anywhere. And that's the thing with the inventory being so low, is that you kind of have to go wherever the buyers want to go right now to move property, because I mean, even in Logan County, we have just bare minimum properties available. I mean, most what you see is already pending, and there's just not a lot of active listings. So when you have these new buyers entering the market that have never bought before, they're like, oh, I have all these options to choose from. Well, it's like, no, you can look at this one, and if you don't buy it today, somebody else will, and you hate to be that guy, but there's just not a lot on the market, and you don't really have the time anymore to think about, okay, I want to bring my mom, I want to bring my grandma, I want to bring my second cousin, so it's just a much different market these days than it ever was before.
I've noticed
So.
you've sold some good commercial pieces too here lately as well.
Right. Yeah, there's been
insight
some-
in some businesses, possibly commercial properties or not?
There's a couple you can see downtown that are working, like the I think it's the butcher shop on the corner. Ethan bought that, and then there's people coming in there, which is awesome. We sold one at the end of Broadway Street that was a hair salon for several decades. That actually closes today, so I can't tell you a whole lot yet about what that will be. But it is great to see these buildings selling and becoming occupied again, rather than just sitting vacant. And because it does kind of make, especially there when you come in from Pulaski or 121 in general, you see an empty commercial building. Like, nobody wants to see that in a community. So it's great to see that building will be used again.
Was
So.
that Helen Meeker and I were talking about that back in the day, maybe before your time too.
Right.
Was that a gas station at one point right there on the corner?
I think somebody told me it was like a grocery store or a convenience store or something.
It'd be right there next to the Knights of Columbus.
It was where Unique Images.
Where Unique Images is
Yeah.
that big brick building, because there's a gas station, or used to be, right down from it,
Yeah.
right there on Limit, and then.
Yeah, I think there was a gas station across, and I was told this one was like a convenience store
Was
or
it a
something,
convenience
like
store
maybe
then?
a bar or something back in the day. I'm not sure, but I think it did have a couple of different uses. So, but it had been Unique Images for as long as I can remember.
Yeah,
so.
she's had that.
Yeah.
Cheryl's had that for business for.
She's ready to retire, and good for her.
Can't
So,
blame her.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So.
Any other big properties you see coming up, or business for sale, or you got other business owners that are saying, hey, I want to come to Logan County or the area?
Yeah, I mean, there's
have?
always people that are kind of looking for, like commercial space, but it's got to be the right commercial space. And most people that are coming, of course, they want to rent at first to get a feel for how things are going to work. And finding a building that's large enough potentially to rent is a hard thing to do. I mean, a lot of our larger, older commercial buildings have been sitting empty for a long time, so they would have to do substantial work. And usually to do that, you would have to be the owner, So it kind of makes it hard from that perspective. But I do have a lot of, younger people that are interested in opening businesses downtown. It's just finding the right fit for them. So. that's always a positive.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I'm blessed that Ethan opened that up because I'm upstairs there. So
I'm glad that building is being utilized because it is a beautiful building.
It is, and the history of it.
Yeah.
So
Ethan's a go-getter, so
he really
I love
is.
to see it.
Yeah. So kind of switching gears a little, balloons over 66.
Right.
What new things do you have?
Yeah, so this year is going to be a little different than the past couple of years since we brought it back. Last year we had over 30 balloons. This year we're trying to cap it at 25 just because 25 is a good number. 30-something was kind of a lot to handle. But this year we're also going to have more. It's not considered competition, but it is in a sense because we're going to actually have targets this year where people can sit and park and watch the balloons come in and try and, throw a beanbag or grab something off of a certain place or something like that. So we're going to score the pilots and the balloonists on their throws, but they're not going to be getting financial prizes. They're going to be getting like some kind of unique trophy or something that we're going to try and make from Kathy at Small Town Corrections is going to work with me on that. But we're trying to make it more fun and exciting for the crowd, but also since it's not technically a quote-unquote event, we're not able to provide financial gains to the pilots for that. So, but a lot of our pilots that come here are very competitive and they like to put on a show for the public. So we just have these fun flights like, yeah, it's great, but I want to compete. I want to show that I know what I'm doing, so, and they don't have to compete if they don't want to. They can just fly for fun, but we're going to have the targets, and we are going to have all the balloons at one designated spot this year. So we have been working with Open Arms, and we're going to go out to that, campus out front there at the old Lincoln Christian University there. So that whole big front yard is where the balloons will be positioned this year so that everybody can park on Route 10 or somewhere around there and be able to see them all in one designated spot. So that is our goal for this year.
I was just going to ask you where at, because you're going to need
That's actually the first time I publicly said that. So yeah. So they've been very cooperative, and I think they're excited to see it too. And they've got the space, so it'll be great. So a couple of the targets will actually be set there. We will launch from there a few times. We'll fly in there, but that is where the glow will be on Friday night that everybody likes to see. So that way they can. And there'll be great parking down Route 10, which is really one of the biggest things. And also just coming into town, it'll be a neat thing to see. So
now will you have a glow then on Saturday night?
So just Saturday.
Oh,
yeah. So Friday night we don't, but Saturday night everybody will glow there.
Everybody will glow on
at
Saturday
that one
night.
spot. So.
And then you'll have targets then on.
Yeah. So the targets will be Friday night, Saturday morning, and then Saturday evening, I believe. Sunday morning will be when we are adding a Sunday morning flight this year too that we haven't done before, just because some of the years past the weather hasn't been the greatest, and we want to make sure that people have the opportunity to fly. So Sunday morning used to be voluntarily, but this year we're going to make it more of a mandatory flight. Pilots can't stay, that's okay too, but we're trying to get it Sunday morning where we take off and fly over town, so we may have to relocate the launch depending on what direction will get us over the town. So we're trying to make sure that everybody can be involved this year, whether that be they get to watch the balloons, or if they can't leave their home, they can hopefully see them Sunday morning come over. So we just got to hope for good weather.
Right. Mother Nature's in control for that.
Yes. But we already have the full 25 pilots and then some. So, and we're very fortunate for that because a lot of the events I go through over the summer, they can't even get 15 or 20 pilots. So the fact that these balloonists want to come to Lincoln, I think, says a lot about Lincoln and what was built up prior to Balloons Over 66, because they enjoyed coming here and they really enjoy the people. They built connections with maybe their sponsor that they had during the Lincoln Art and Balloon Festival, and a lot of them, that's who they spend their weekend with. So, and some of these pilots have been coming for 30, 40 years. So I think, like I said, that really says a lot about them and, the community.
Where's the furthest the pilots are, or whereabouts are they all located?
So there's one that comes every year from Albuquerque. So his wife actually grew up and was raised in Lincoln, so they have ties here. So they'll come usually on Tuesday or Wednesday the week before, spend the week and spend some time with the family. But we have pilots that come from really all over. Most I would say are a state or two away, but we do have some that come further. So, and they love to come. So we love to have them.
I know people like to drive by at night because they are fueling, I guess you can say,
yes.
up there at the Oasis.
The Oasis, yes. So
people drive by and sit there and go, oh, there's, and kids are getting out taking pictures.
And it really works for us that way. So we position it that way because the pilots stay at Comfort Inn. They've housed the pilots for years, and so we've set up Hicks Gas will bring their truck and will fuel us at the Oasis, and they've been great to work with us. But the Oasis also puts on a Saturday morning pilot brunch, so really the community is incredible to work with all of us to make this happen. But everything that happens is all sponsored or done locally too. So like I said, it says a lot about the community.
If somebody wants to volunteer, and are you looking for volunteers?
Always. we really need volunteers to put their hands on the balloons. That's the biggest thing that we look for each year. So, there'll be more information to come, but if people want to volunteer, all they have to do is come to the hotel that Friday night. And usually it's about 5 or 5:15, and then we'll put them with the pilot, and they can help that night or they can help all weekend. And a lot of times if you help the pilot, you get to go up in the balloon too. So there's it's really an incentive. And we usually say kids are welcome too. I mean, small kids that may not be able to help, it may be kind of hard, but if they're able to put their hands on and want to work, we love to have them, and always wear closed-toed shoes and dress appropriately. But yeah, we can always use more hands on the balloons. So.
Well, that's neat that you're able to actually go to one location now, because others would be like, well, the balloon I wanted to see was at location A, and the other one.
And that was the thing we've had the past couple of years. It was hard to find one spot that could house everybody without having to pay a ridiculous fee to rent the space. So we utilized a few places, and we were very thankful for them. Like the Dugan Center, they were gracious. Kevin and Peggy Bateman let us use their place. We used to launch from the old hospital lot on 8th Street, and then the dog park came in, so we didn't want to disrupt. There were dogs, and their pets are not fans of hot air balloons. The noise. So we chose not to use that spot this last year, but we've been very, very fortunate to have people that were able to volunteer their space for us. So
crazy question. Sometimes we think, oh, it's too cold, and then we look up and we see a balloon. Mm-hmm. What's temperature?
I would rather fly when it's cold. So you burn a lot less when it's colder, if you think about it, and you also have to remember when you're in the balloon, if it's 100 degrees outside, it's like 200 degrees in the balloon because you're right under the burner. So, I mean, realistically, you could fly almost any temperature. But if it's cold, sometimes you have to heat your tank the night before, or your tanks to keep the propane, But I like to fly when it's 30 to 50 degrees. So,
really?
Yeah. Because you have to think about, too, you're going with the wind, so you're not really feeling the wind, so you're not cold, and you're right underneath those burners that put off a lot of heat. So in the 100-degree hot summer days, it's miserable in the balloon. You're trying to enjoy it, but you're also trying to breathe. So, the sweat's running everywhere, and, I mean, it's always fun and it's always beautiful, but I would prefer to fly when it's a little bit cooler outside.
Yeah, because there's been times when you look up and it's March and there's a balloon. And
yes.
Wait a minute, it's too cold.
And even right now, you'll see some occasionally. When there's snow on the ground, it's actually my favorite time to fly. Dry snow, not wet snow. So when you land, your balloon's not getting put away wet. But it's one of a kind to fly in the summer, but it's also amazing to fly in the winter when you can look down and see everything covered with snow. Right. So it's beautiful, honestly, year round. But it just depends on
They do make drones for that, so you can look down.
I know, and I'll tell you, I have a hard time getting crew in the winter because who wants to stand by a fan during inflation when it's 10 degrees outside? Yeah. So thank you to my crew that's done that. But yes, it's not always enjoyable for them.
Do they look at their cell phone when you call and text and hey, let's go fly?
I think they try to think of an excuse. I know that it's not true. So, and my parents can't ever seem to get out of it. So they usually show up too. So
no, yeah. I just didn't know if there was an odd time that you really cannot fly.
I mean, if it's over 100, it really probably isn't safe, if that makes sense, because it does get overheated. So you've got a temperature at the top of the balloon, and if it gets over a certain level, it's actually dangerous for the fabric. So when it's 95 plus degrees outside, you really should be flying yourself and maybe one other. You don't want to put too much weight in the balloon just because it does become difficult or hard on the balloon. But when it's cooler, you can barely burn and go up pretty quick. So that's the nice thing in the winter. You can burn and then not have to burn again for a minute, and you're still staying at level flight. So it just kind of depends, but you learn that over time too. But there's some pilots, they're fair weather pilots, and that's it. They don't want to fly in the winter, and they don't want to fly when it's super hot, and I get it, because it probably is better for the balloon and for them personally, but if I can fly, I'm going to go. So
how many local pilots do we have? Because I know there's
I mean, offhand, we've probably got 8 or 9. So
has it grown? Are they older? Are they younger?
There's a mix of retired and then younger. I mean, so we have some pilots in their 20s, and we've got some in their 70s and 80s. So it's a sport that once you get into, you don't really want to get out of. It's a very expensive thing, but it's very addicting. I think Jim Ireland is one here that had his license for the longest, and he doesn't have a balloon anymore, but he does still fly. Their daughter still has a balloon, and their other daughter is also involved in ballooning as well. So and then you've got Jim Phelan and Teresa, and Jim is the one that trained me, and he's trained countless other other people locally. So
Do Conklin still have a balloon?
so Reed Conklin actually owns the balloon now that Randy, his dad, used to have.
Okay.
So I think Randy still flies too, but Reed flies primarily.
Reed does have his
yeah, and
license.
Reed's in the area and flies. So Reed's been licensed for some time. But yeah, there's probably a good 10 or so local pilots. So
Really?
that's why you'll see a balloon here quite a bit randomly, one or two. So yeah, a lot of them
It's
fly
kind of
together.
comical. Somebody will take a picture. Seth's flying,
Yes.
and then I've seen you respond back. No,
Yeah,
I'm
it's always
flying a house.
it's just a random balloon in Lincoln. Like, it's Seth, and I'm like, well, it's not quite, but there's somebody up there, and I'm jealous of whoever's up there, but I do see it, you know. So yeah.
So if somebody would like to get into ballooning and doesn't have the funds or the means to buy
Right.
a brand new balloon,
Sure.
where can they go? What is the cost,
Right.
for that, or general cost?
Right. Yeah, so when I got into ballooning, when I first bought my first system, I was 22, so I didn't have a lot of funds, and it was just me. And so I bought a used system from Rick Zimmer, who still lives locally, and he was getting out of ballooning. So I bought Rick's first system, and I paid under $7,000 for the whole thing, which was incredible, because most envelopes, baskets, fans are much more expensive than that. So you can get into ballooning reasonably. Now, if you want to get full into ballooning and get a new system, it can add up real quick. But yeah, I mean, there are ways to get in there, and like I said, there's a lot of local pilots here that are commercially licensed that can help people get into ballooning. I personally have my private license just because I chose not to upgrade to commercial, because not that I didn't want to help people get their license, but I just don't really have the time to give the commercial training, and it's a lot more responsibility, I feel like, too. So when I fly, I like to fly for leisure. I don't like to charge people, which some do, but it's more of a hobby for me than a career. And people can have a career in ballooning. There's people out in New Mexico that can fly 10 people at a time and charge them all, and that's what they do for a living. So but yeah, I mean, back to your question, there's a lot of local pilots that are commercially licensed that are willing to help people get in there, and they can train them on their systems that they already have, and then help them get into it as reasonably as possible as well.
How long does it take? Is it a study as you go? Is there a lot of hours? Like driving a car and getting your learner's permit. Is there a lot of flying hours you have to put in?
Yeah, I don't really know what the current requirements are. I knew what they were when but I mean, yeah, I had to have so many in-flight hours with a licensed pilot. You have to have the written exam, you have to pass that. You have to do an oral exam with a commercial pilot, and then you have to do a check ride. So I mean, there was a long process, and for me, if I'm being honest, it probably took me 4 years to get from start to finish, because it was kind of on the back burner. And bless Jim for dealing with me for that long, because it was a slow process, and it's hard. I mean, it's an actual pilot's license, so there's a lot of information that you'll never use in the balloon, but you have to remember. And so it was not an easy test. I remember going to take my written exam, and I hit submit, and I thought I didn't pass that. I think you had to get a 70, and I got a 71, so I was happy with that. Because it was hard. But I mean, there's a big difference, obviously, between knowing how to fly the balloon and knowing all the legality, all the stuff in the book. So it's very time consuming, but I've seen pilots that have taken a week course and passed. I mean, so you can, if you dedicate your time and your energy to it, you can get licensed pretty quickly. So yeah, it just depends on the pace you want to go.
Wow.
So
You want to go flying?
No.
You don't want to go get your license?
Not a big fan of heights. So
I tell you, I don't even really like heights that much, which makes it even interesting that I fly. But, and then I have to remember that I've got people's lives on the line with me in there, so I just try to pretend that it doesn't. Yeah. It seems like the older I get, the less I enjoy them, but I still love the balloons, so I'm still hanging on. But I got my first ride when I was 13 with Ed Dowling, who was a local pilot at the time. They've since moved, up north, and Ed's still involved in ballooning, but with his health, he's not actively flying. But it was awesome to get my first ride with him, because he had such passion for it, and it really kind of triggered me to want to pursue it. And then, like I said, it was just from then on I started crewing, and then I got involved, with actually training and learning in my 20s. So
What questions do you have? Do you have any?
What I know you said it was sort of there wasn't a strict timeline as far as getting your license. Sure. What are the differences as far as a private license versus a commercial license?
So, and that's something I've started my commercial a couple of times, just never really gotten too far. But I think for the commercial, you now have to be privately licensed for so long, and then you can apply for the commercial. So I think the information is pretty similar. It's just about a matter of flight hours and instruction and stuff like that. So there's a lot of local commercial pilots like, oh, I'll train you on that. And I'm like, sure, well, we'll get around to it. But It's easy now because you do get a lot of calls, can you give a balloon ride? And for me, the easiest response is I'm not commercially licensed. So, I mean, I can fly them privately just fine. But, if people want to pay or contribute, then you have to be commercially licensed to actually take pay for the ride. So, and generally, like for me, I'll fly during events and a couple of times throughout the year just to get crew up. But it's time consuming too to fly because you've got to find the people to do it, and it's either at sunrise or sunset. And most people don't want to get up any earlier than they have to in the morning. And, right now with it getting dark at 5 o'clock, you've got to be in the air by 2:30 or 3, and, people are still at work. So it's kind of tricky to do that. But, yeah, I mean, back to the question, I mean, there's a little bit of difference. I think mostly it's just your instruction and your experience, from moving from that private to commercial. So.
And are those licenses good for a lifetime? Or
yeah, so my license, you just have to renew like every other year. You'll do a biannual flight review, so get reviewed that way. But yeah, I mean, my pilot's license is still, I think it's still good. I haven't ever had to renew it, I should say. So, and I've had it now for about 14 years. So, you just have to do the biannual flight review to be an active pilot at like events and stuff like that. So.
Very good.
I did have someone email me about a question for you for ballooning. Sure. They want to know, what's the furthest distance you have flown?
So I would probably say back at an event in Macomb one year, I took off and it was like 35 miles per hour above, which is actually pretty quick in a balloon. So I could not get down because there was cattle everywhere and it was pretty breezy. And I'm like, oh, maybe it'll just die down as the day goes on. So I actually flew 3 counties away. All the other pilots landed in the same county. And they're like, where's Seth going? So I was up for like almost 2 hours. But see, you can fly until your propane's out if you want. And that morning I was pushing the end of my propane and I saw this nice tree line and no cattle. I'm like, that's it, I'm coming down. But I probably went 40 miles, which is a long way in a balloon. But we had the speed overhead to go that far, so
to carry you.
Yeah, I mean, and there's some flights on the morning that you'll take off and it's like 5 miles per hour on the ground, which is great for landings. But you get 400 feet in the air and you're going 40 miles per hour, and it's like, I didn't sign up for this, So you don't want to land at 40 miles per hour, but sometimes it can be really fun to go that fast above grade because then you can really go places.
And I'm sure your spotters, your crew, and your risk.
They're flying in the van. They're speeding down below, and they can't even keep up with me some days. And I'm like, this might be a problem. But usually you're lucky to go maybe 8 miles, 10 miles during a balloon flight. So, but yeah, overhead speed is fun sometimes. So as long as it doesn't drop too quick, and when you come into land, you're going 40, then you're in.
The other question they had is, what's the highest elevation you've gone up?
So I'm not a high flyer. I don't know why, because ultimately if you're coming down, you're coming down. You know what I mean? But when I did my first check flight to get my license, you had to go to 3,000 feet. And honestly, that's probably about the highest I've flown. I just usually will stay between like 1,000, 2,000 feet. Now, we have local pilots that'll go to 10,000 feet daily when they fly. Like, they love it, and for me it's like, that's cool, but I can see what I need to see at about 1,000 feet, so but I mean, yeah, you can go about as high, 10,000-ish feet. We've had several pilots that will do that, like I said, pretty often around here, so that's just a little high for me.
I remember one year coming back from Springfield and Balloon Fest was going on, and anyway, it seemed like all of a sudden the balloons just got sucked straight up, like instantly. They disappeared into the clouds.
Right.
What would you call that? I forgot, because I talked to some pilots about that.
Yeah, sometimes when you fly, you'll have like thermal activity and stuff, which will either cause you to go up or down real quick. And it does.
Was a ride. They said all of a sudden they just shot.
And it does happen, and you better hang on, because no matter how good of a pilot you are, there's only so many things you can control. And the weather, and it can be the perfect day outside, like it looks perfect. This actually happened to me in Macomb this year. We took off Friday night, and it was one of those nights. You were just flying along, and all of a sudden you're either ascending or descending at 4,000 feet a minute, and you haven't burnt and you haven't vented, and it's like, what is going on? The balloon starts spinning in circles, and so you just have to let it kind of get through that, and then you have to remember that you still have to fly the balloon. So if you're not burning and you haven't burnt for a minute, but you're still going up, remember, you go up fast, you're going to be coming down just as fast. So there's a lot of things that you have to experience in that training to really know, because once you're on your own, you're on your own. And even that night, I was like, what am I supposed to do? And my pastor was like, this is the best thing ever. She was live feeding it on Facebook. It was their anniversary, and they didn't even know anything was wrong. And I'm like, just keep on focusing on ahead here, and I'll fly the balloon. But yeah, it was, and it wasn't just me. It was every balloon around me. You could see we were all doing different things. And so it just kind of depends on the weather. If you're in the thermal activity, and a lot of times that's caused by excessive heat off of pavement and stuff like that. So you just have to be conscious of where you're at and your surroundings. But the worst thing is if you're in a thermal and you're around power lines and stuff like that, because there really is only so much control that you have, you know. So, and you know, sometimes in thermals it will cause your fabric to go inward, and so you can't burn at certain times. So you just have to be really careful and know how to handle those types of situations. And again, you honestly never know when it may happen. You could be having the perfectly level, great flight, and a lot of times that'll happen in evening flights. I mean, mornings there's not usually a lot of thermal activity, but in the evening when the sun's setting and the temperature's dropping and the heat's still coming off the pavement, sometimes you'll really feel that in your envelope. So you just have to really, you don't want to be too low to the ground when that happens.
Where do they launch there in Macomb?
So we usually launch from Western Campus.
Okay.
Yeah, so from their fields there. So their event is right on the campus for the majority of the weekend. So, and we took off
after Lincoln, or they
Macomb is September, so they're after.
In September,
yeah,
okay.
so Macomb I think offhand's the second weekend in September, so they're 2 weeks after Lincoln, because there's several that go in a row. Like it's Danville is usually the first one.
Danville, you go to Danville first.
Danville's usually first in July, and then Galesburg is late July, and then August you've got Centralia, Quad Cities, and then Lincoln, and then Macomb comes after that, and then Shelbyville is usually the latest one in October. So all of our local pilots don't go to Shelbyville because they go to Albuquerque. So the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta is the same time that Shelbyville is. So my goal is this year to go to Albuquerque. I'm not sure if I'm ready, but I'm going to make myself. So it's a lot of flying, and there's a lot of balloons out there. You know, 600 to 800 balloons a year, and you fly every day for like 10 days straight. You know, so but it's just an experience that I feel like every pilot needs to experience at some point in their life, and I'd rather do it now and maybe continue to go. So I love Shelbyville. That's not the reason why I haven't gone, because it's like 8 to 10 balloons, and it's super laid back, so you get to hang out with the pilots all weekend, and it's just there's really no pressure. Some of the events, they really want you to compete. You know, they want you to hit the targets and do things like that. And my idea of ballooning is like, I just want to have fun with it. You know, I want to fly, and I want my passengers to enjoy it. If I hit the target, it's a miracle. And it does happen occasionally. And I got second place in Danville one time, and they're like, oh, you're really good. I'm like, no, it just was pure luck. So I came over the trees. Yeah. I'm like, I came over the trees, and the target was there, and I hit it. You know, so I mean, I enjoy the competition aspect, but I enjoy the fun part of it more. And I want to, like I said, people that have never flown before, I don't want them to be focused on me hitting a target as opposed to actually enjoying their flight and feeling like they can ask me questions about it and how, you know, how it operates. So, but everybody views that differently, and some can multitask better than me. So, you know.
And again, for our listeners, how many's out there at Albuquerque then?
600 to 800 hot air balloons. And honestly, whether you're a pilot or a spectator, everybody should experience that at one time. I mean, when I was a kid, before I was licensed, I went out there for a couple of days, and it was fascinating to sit. And you can go on the launch site and just watch them all take off. And in Albuquerque, they have box winds, so the balloons will take off and come back sometimes and land right where they took off. It's fascinating. So, and they will fly in a lot of different weather out there. I mean, obviously, it's got to be what they call safe, but a lot of times you'll be moving a little quicker in Albuquerque. But if you have to think about it, that's a huge event, so they want the show to go on for all the people that do show up. But Albuquerque to me was not the most beautiful landscape, but the balloons were incredible. They're flying over the mountains and landing in all these different places, and it's a very, very neat experience. So, and
you have to take a crew, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've got a commercial pilot. I think she's going to go with me this year if we can get in. And so you have to actually apply, and they do only choose so many. So I'm not even sure that I will be able to get in. Regardless, I do plan to go, whether that's watching or flying with somebody else. But there's a commercial pilot that I flown with a lot in Champaign, and so we're going to try and get in, and maybe you can have a pilot and then a secondary pilot. So we're hoping to maybe do it that way, to where she can fly, I can fly, all of that. So we'll see how it goes.
That's neat.
It's a long commitment, though. It takes 2 days to get out there, 10 days to fly, 2 days to get back.
Yeah, because you just can't pack your balloon on an airplane and go. You know?
That's the thing that I've had a hard time with, because I like to work too much. And 2 weeks off, I'm like, I don't know how. Real estate doesn't really stop, So I'm like, I don't know how I would be in Albuquerque for 14 days, but we'll figure it out. So
good. I hope you're able. When do they let you know then if you are?
So I think you apply in March, and I think they send out a notification in April. So I think that that way you can plan, accordingly. So, and it's hard to get lodging out there because it's such a popular thing. So I booked an Airbnb in November in hopes that, well, like I said, whether I get it or not, I do plan to go for a couple of days and at least enjoy it. So we'll have a place to go, and and if Betsy, the one that I fly with in Champaign, if she gets in, then I can, like I said, still go and enjoy that with her too. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah. But they do a live feed every morning with their flight. So if people aren't there, they should watch it on the Albuquerque website, because it really is amazing to see 600 to 800 take off at one time. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bumping. It's a lot of air traffic. That's the one thing that makes me a little nervous, because, like I said, with box winds, you can be going one way and the other balloon's coming right back at you. So it's a very unique landscape and flying conditions.
Wow.
So,
you have anything else for
I think I'm good.
outstanding guests? And Jim, anything?
What's the scariest you ever had?
Oh, yeah.
In a balloon?
What's the scariest you've ever had in a balloon?
Probably when I was in a thermal, like we were talking about earlier. Honestly, the one in Baco made me a little nervous this past year. Just because even though you may know what you're doing, there's only so much you control that you have there. And when you're surrounded by other balloons and you're over a town that you're not super familiar with, it's sometimes tricky and a little concerning as to how you're going to get that thing back on the ground, all the while maintaining your calmness, like nothing's going on, because your passengers, they don't know. They just, if it's their first time flying and you're going up at 4,000 feet a minute and your balloon's making all kinds of noises, they're like, oh, this is cool. So, but yeah, and that takes some experience to really know how to be comfortable with that. But I've also witnessed it from the ground and seen other balloons do it, and it really is. It's very interesting to watch how balloons react in that situation, because the sides can cave in and they can shoot up and they can spin around, and it's just a very unique thing. But I would say that's probably the only time that I've really been super concerned. Most flights are pretty level. The air is okay. You're not having all those different things. But yeah, thankfully I haven't had too many, I would say, scary experiences, and I hope to keep it that way. So
have you had very many road landings?
A lot. I prefer to land on the road.
Really?
Especially in the morning, because the ground's usually wet. So if you're thinking, like, if you land in the grass in the morning and say you don't know when your next flight's going to be, your balloon's getting put away wet. And so that's the worst thing for it, because it'll get moldy and it will smell and it can rot and things like that. So my priority is always to hit a driveway or a road. Now you can tarp it too if not, but then you got to remember you got to dry the tarp out. So it's this whole thing. If you can hit a road in the morning, that's my preference. Evening, usually it's drier, so you can land on I love to land on a nice yard or something like that, but a road is where it's at in the morning. So, but it's hard to find a road with no power lines.
I was going to say,
so, and when the crops are up in the summer, your landing spots are very limited, because you have to hit either a road with no power lines or hope somebody has a nice grass area that you can come into. Now, there's been some pretty small, tight spaces we've landed in before, and you make it work, but there's some nights you're up for a long time and the sun's setting, and it's like, I really could use an open space right now. So, that's probably a question of yours, or an answer yours earlier about being scared. There were some nights where it was almost sunset and I was very low on propane and I could not get a landing spot. But at the end of the day, you have to do what you have to do. Landing in a farmer's field is never the choice thing. But there are times where sometimes you may have to utilize a well or two of their field even, and then call them for forgiveness later. But waterway landings are common too. It's just a matter of making sure the crew can get into the waterway. That's a problem because of the depth and things like that. But where there's a will, there's a way, and I've carried my balloon out of many places before that I'd rather not have to do again. So it's hot and it's heavy usually in the summer, but yeah, if you got to get down, you'll find a way. So, yep.
Well, Seth, we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Coming in today and sharing that, and the breaking news of balloons over 66. You heard it first from the one and only. Seth is going to be out there at Open Arms. I don't want to say Lincoln Christian University, but we can, but not. But
right in front of the big open area. So we're thankful they're going to work with us this year.
That is wonderful. One unique spot. Well, folks, thank you for tuning into Viewpoint. The Lord and weather willing, we'll be back next week.
This live video stream is made possible in part by WLCN's live stream technology sponsor, Me Realty, located at 602 Keokuk Street in Lincoln, and online at merealty.com. The preceding program is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com.